Okay, so I hope that you guys can hear me now. I am sorry about whatever happened here. I understand that you weren't hearing me. Um, anyway, I was talking about complex trauma, and I was talking about the fact that clients that have complex trauma, usually the type of trauma that they have had includes abuse, neglect, exploitation, betrayal, rejection, and things like that. And it happens when when they are growing up in their early phases of development. And the type of trauma that they experience affects them not only physically, but also emotionally in the way they think about themselves. So basically, in my profession, I see a lot of people that have complex trauma, and they usually come in saying that they are struggling in their relationships. They don't understand why they don't have people that really feel close to them. They usually have problems with their relatives, in their families. They'll say to me, I really get along well with my husband, but I don't seem to get along with other people. And it's not until we start to really work together that we realize that these people are struggling because they still react to triggers of anything that to them might appear like trauma. Like, for instance, if you have complex trauma and you have a family member, let's say, invites everybody over for dinner but doesn't invite you, you immediately feel rejected, and everything that you experience as a child is going to come back. And so now you're reacting in ways that you don't want to react, but you're not even able to identify what's going on. So you become very angry. You can immediately shut down, and now you're rejecting people. Now, the type of trauma that we're talking about, the complex trauma, is trauma that has happened not only one time, but throughout your life, or during the time that many times when you were a kid. And when it happens with people that were supposed to take care of you, that were supposed to love you, that was supposed to be people that were trustworthy, that really affects your belief about yourself. Suddenly you believe that you are not a good person, or that there's something wrong with you. It also affects how you relate with other people, because now you're afraid that the same thing is going to happen with whoever it is that you engage with. Your life becomes a survival, and you react in a survival mode whenever you feel triggered. And to feel triggered doesn't take very much. I mean, you can feel triggered by little things, and so there's not real danger that's happening, but you're perceiving that situation as a dangerous situation to you. I understand that a lot of people in this group have had situations of trauma in their lives, and unfortunately a lot of us have had situations where we've been traumatized by the people that we're supposed to love and take care of us. And that is one of the most difficult things that can happen. Now, people ask me, what's the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and complex trauma? First of all, complex trauma is not really a diagnosis that's on the DSM-5 yet, but it just means that there's been trauma, but it's more pervasive, and it was done during the stages of development. And so when that happens, when you're developing and trauma happens during that time, everything changes in terms of how you react later on in life. And unfortunately, the people that were supposed to be there for us, a lot of times, they're the ones that continue to trigger us over time. So let's say that you were abused by your father. You were sexually abused by your father. When you grow up, you start to have triggers, or anything that happens, you perceive that as a rejection. It might be something simple, but now your father or mother say to you, "Oh, you're a difficult person. It's very hard to be around you." They're again abusing you. It's secondary wounding to you. And so people don't understand that. It's very hard for them to understand, why is it that you need to be loved so much and you push people away at the same time? Well, you need to be loved because that's what you never had, and you push people away because you think that they're going to hurt you. And that happens over and over again. So let's see. The areas that you are affected when you have complex trauma are, first of all, your emotion regulation. You have a really hard time when you get upset controlling the pain or the feelings of sadness that you have. You can become so emotional that it's hard for you to stop feeling sad or stop crying. I have complex trauma. And so anything that I perceive as rejection triggers me. An example would be, my daughter telling me that she doesn't want to talk to me. I mean, every teenager will say that to their mom, at least once in their lifetime. "I don't want to talk to you." Well, if my daughter tells me that, I'm not thinking that this is just my daughter, a teenager, telling me this. I am feeling an emotion. My body is physically feeling something. I am triggered so bad that I immediately cannot breathe. I start hyperventilating. And I immediately feel like I have to escape, I have to run away, I have to go someplace, I have to leave that situation because I'm being hurt again. And so I have had several situations like that, and it took a while, I think, for my family to understand what was going on. Just recently, I had a situation where I felt triggered, and I packed my suitcase and I went to a hotel. I had to run away because I couldn't breathe. And so that's one of the areas that you're affected. The other area that you're affected is in your interpersonal relationships too, because you want so much to have relationships with people, but you can be very intense as well. And so sometimes people push you away. They don't want to have those relationships with you. You have to get to a point of understanding that people don't understand your story. They don't know what's really going on. And in therapy, you have to also be able to know how to soothe yourself, how to take care of yourself, and that can take time. Like I said, sometimes when I'm triggered, I'm not thinking, right? I'm reacting. And so as I leave the place and I spend some time by myself, then I'm able to use those tools that I know, that I've learned, that I teach other people how to use, and then I can calm myself. I can do that on my own, but I cannot stop the reaction, the physical reaction that takes place when I'm triggered. Let's see, what else is important for you to know about complex trauma? Let me see. So it can also really, what I see, and this is not my problem, and I think it's because I have had a lot of experience as a therapist, and with the amount of study that I have under my belt. But what I see with a lot of people is a complete devaluation of themselves, feeling like they're not good enough, or that there's something wrong with them, there's something broken. And a lot of times I'll ask them, well, show me, where is it broken? There's nothing broken, but it really feels like there is a feeling that that you're not good enough. That sometimes people will say, I'm bad, I'm a bad person. And that's because of the messages that you developed growing up. And so that can be difficult when you're working with it. And the third area is a feeling like it's almost like you're not really there. Like you and I hear my clients describe this a lot. They say, I go to church, but I just don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I belong in that place. I don't feel like I'm part of it. That can be really difficult, because in their heads they are doing a lot of emotional reasoning. In other words, I feel that I'm not connected to these people, and it must be true that I'm not connected. Or I feel I'm not loved, and it must be true that I'm not loved. When in fact, that is not true. And so those are the three areas that you see people being affected by complex trauma the most. I would say that understanding how you respond to rejection is probably one of the most important things you can do. I really did not know that I had complex trauma. This is so funny, because I knew I had trauma. I knew I had PTSD, but I didn't know I had complex trauma and what it meant to me in terms of my feelings and how I pushed people away, until much later. I was already a therapist. I already had a clinic, and I came to understand this at a conference. I was at a conference, and I saw this presenter talking about this, and he was saying how he suddenly found himself listening behind doors because he thought people were talking about him. And he found himself running from his work, running away, trying to calm down because his emotions were overwhelming to him, because he thought somebody, didn't want him to be part of a group or something. And he talked about this, he used this word complex trauma. And everything that he was saying, I could identify myself as having felt before, having experienced before. And so I started to do some research about that. And it made sense. Everything that I had experienced made sense to me. It made sense to me how I felt when I would stop by my mother's house, and she was having a family dinner and all my siblings were there, but I wasn't invited. And how I literally felt like I was suffocating and I couldn't breathe. I understood then, okay, this is what's happening to me. Or how I would constantly have problems trusting people, or how I would push people away because it was so much easier for me not to be rejected, so I just pushed them away. Or how I felt many times that I was not part of whatever it is that I was part of, or that feeling of I'm looking at you but you're very distant from me. I'm not even in the same space as you are. So that really helped me to develop, once I developed this understanding, to develop a plan. Okay, so how am I going to take care of myself? What am I going to do when I'm triggered this way? And it also involved making very difficult decisions. You want to have the people that you love, that are part of your family, especially your mother, your father, your siblings. You want to have them in your life. That's so important to you. I mean, you really want to be loved by them. You want to have relationships with them. But sometimes that's not possible, because they're the ones that continue to hurt you. And to hurt you, they don't understand, is not the same thing as to hurt somebody else that doesn't have complex trauma. Because to say to somebody else, yeah, I forgot that you invited me over for dinner, it's not a big deal. They might say, yeah, that's not a big deal. But for you, that is a huge deal. That affects you physically, emotionally, and to a level that other people don't understand. And so you have to come to terms to, okay, I cannot have you in my life because I can't function if I have you in my life. And that can be really hard. So I see that I have a lot of people asking questions. So one question here is complex trauma typically caused by an authoritative figure, or can it also come from, for example, sibling abuse? So complex trauma doesn't have to be just by an authoritative figure. Any figure that you're supposed to have a relation. Sometimes, for instance, a sibling, an older sibling, is someone that you're supposed to look up to. You're supposed to trust. And so that person does have a very important role in your life. And if you are abused by a sibling, you can definitely have complex trauma from that. Absolutely. The other question here is complex trauma typically caused by an authoritative figure. Okay, this is the same question. But anyway, going back to complex trauma, it's really important that we understand how this affects us. It's important that we have compassion with ourselves. It's important that we learn how to soothe ourselves. It's important that we create good boundaries for ourselves. We are survivors. People that have complex trauma are the strongest people I know. And they're the most loving people I know. They have an ability to love like nobody else that I know. They have resilience like anybody else that I know. But they can also push people away just because it's what they have to do sometimes to survive. What you see with complex trauma a lot of times is people developing substance abuse, or developing an eating disorder, or developing behaviors such as hurting themselves. And all of those things are things that they do in order to cope with the pain. So a lot of times they don't even know that they're being triggered, and they're going to their coping mechanism. In my situation, I developed an eating disorder. I have struggled with my weight most of my adult life, and I about a year and a half ago, I lost a lot of weight. I have a program that teaches you how to eat when you're hungry, how to stop when you're satisfied. And I lost 85 pounds from that. I was ecstatic. I was so happy that this had taken place. And I had then an incident. This was 2 years ago, I'm sorry. I had an incident with a family member. It was a very bad incident, and it triggered me like nothing else before. And suddenly, I got right back where I was before. I saw the weight. Every day I would step on my scale, and I would see the pounds coming back up. Every day. And I would tell myself, what is happening? I need to stop this. How can I stop this? But every single day, without fail, I would see the pounds creeping back in until I got to the heaviest that I've ever been in my life. I got up to 301 pounds. And it affected my health. It affected everything about my life. I just could hardly sleep at night. I had a hard time moving. And then I had to stop and say, okay, what happened? And that was part of my understanding. Okay, I do have complex trauma. I was triggered. I was coping with that trigger, with that pain. Now I need to learn how to stop this. I need to learn how to stop a trigger, how to stop this cycle of destruction. And that's what I think I figured out. And I was able to do. So just recently, I lost 115 pounds. I'm very happy where I am, but I definitely had to eliminate some people from my life that weren't helping me, that weren't healthy for me. That was a very important part of what I had to do. And I had to do it because I love myself and I need to take care of myself. So the complex trauma, someone is asking me if it will ever be admitted to the DSM. There are people that are definitely working on that. There has been some changes on the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. It used to be that you have to have experienced something that was horrifying to you, that you remember that it was horrifying to you, and now that is not part of the diagnosis anymore. And so they're considering some more changes. Hopefully one of them will be the complex trauma, because it is different from PTSD. I just want to kind of open up the time for you. I think I shared a lot about myself. One thing that I used to, I used to hide. I used to hide the fact that I was abused, molested as a child. I used to hide that, that I had, that this was done by my stepfather, that I had a mother that was emotionally unavailable for me. And I used to pretend that everything was great, that I had this wonderful, beautiful family. I don't pretend anymore. I'm very open about that. That's part of my healing process. And I think it's also part of being able to help other people, to have the courage to come forward and say, yes, I was abused. Yes, this is hard. But, I'm a loving, caring person. And I'm dealing with it the best that I can. So someone asked me if complex trauma can be misdiagnosed as PTSD. Absolutely. And here's the problem. I see that happen a lot of times where a client will be diagnosed with PTSD, and so the therapist is basically just working with them on the trauma. They're not working with them on the relationships. They are not making the connection between the trauma that happened and how that person now is being triggered by relationships. They only help the client with, okay, you're triggered if anything reminds you of the trauma that you suffered, but they don't understand that rejection is the main thing. And they have to look at how that client is feeling rejected and how she's acting and what she's doing to cope with the feelings of rejection. So that's the basic difference, and it makes a big difference in treatment. So borderline personality disorder. I think that a lot of people are misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder. They'll kind of go to a therapist, especially if it's a therapist that doesn't understand much about trauma. They'll say, okay, you have borderline personality disorder because you are acting in destructive ways, in your relationships. But it's nothing like that. It's you're pushing people away, and you want them, but you push them away. You want them because you need to feel loved. You push them away because you're feeling triggered. And so I I see that all the time where people are misdiagnosed with that. So someone is asking if a person can experience both complex trauma and PTSD, or is it more likely one or the other? They're different. Complex trauma just means that you have had not just one trauma, but the trauma that you had basically started off very early in life, during the formative years, the time when you're supposed to develop trust and develop close relationships. And because of that, now it really affects those relationships today. So it's a little bit different than PTSD. So I would say that everybody that has complex trauma also has a level of PTSD, if you understand what I'm saying. So they had the traumatic event, but it's more than PTSD because it's more complex than just PTSD. Okay, so there is a really, really good book if you want to know more about this. Someone is asking me if there's any books or websites. The name of the book is, let me see here. I think I have it here on my shelf. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to show you the book that has a lot of information about complex trauma, and it also goes into some of the ways that you can help yourself with the situation. It's called Treatment of Complex Trauma by Christine Courtois and Julian Ford. This is a great book. So if you want to know more about it, you can definitely order that on Amazon.com. Let me see. Another question. As leader of a youth group, how can I support a youth with trauma? I would add, how can members of the church support each other? You know, that's a really good question. How can you support someone with trauma? Basically, you have to be understanding that they are going to feel triggered, that they might push you away because they're afraid of feeling rejected, but they want love. They want love more than anybody else, because that's the thing that they don't have in their lives, or they don't feel like they have. And so insist on that relationship. Show them that you can be trusted by being there for them, even when they're not very pleasant. Support that young person by showing your love. And if she does anything that you would deem as, pushing you away, insist on the relationship. That's how I think you can help her. Okay, so someone is asking me to put the name of the book on the notes, but since I'm using my phone, let me see if I can go. Yes, I can. All right, so let me type this up. Okay, there you go. That's the name of the book. Okay. So I understand that it's breaking up a lot. I have my house is probably my house because the Wi-Fi here does not work very well. I don't know why. It breaks up a lot. I didn't think about that. I should have done this in my office. I'm sorry if you guys can't hear me very well. Okay. All right. Anyway, this is what I have to say about complex trauma today. I apologize for the trouble of having to wait for me to to do this. This is the first time I do a live, a live one on Facebook. So I guess there's always a first time for everything. But if you have any questions, any concerns, let me know. I want you to know that for some reason, we have to go through what we're going through. And I think it's because we're strong. Because many times I think back about my past and the things that I've been through, and I say, why did this happen to me? But I've learned better than that. I've learned to just accept that it is what it is. And it's probably because I'm a strong person and I've accepted this challenge, even before I came. And also because I am grateful for the opportunity I have to have had those experiences. Because many times when I see a client and they're telling me about this hole that they feel inside, like it's a black hole, they don't know why they have it or what it is, I tell them, give it to me. Give it to me because I want to feel it. And I can actually feel that black hole because I feel it too. I felt it too. I'm very familiar with what it is. And I don't think that if I hadn't had those experiences, I would be able to understand what they're talking about. So I have some more questions here. Have you been able to resume a relationship with your mother? Do you recommend it under any circumstances when a parent has been abusive? That's a really good question, Karen. Unfortunately, my mother has hurt me a lot, and I would like nothing more than be able to have my mother in my life, if my mother could be in my life in a healthy way. Unfortunately, she can't. My mother never thought that she did anything wrong. She doesn't think she does anything wrong. And my mother is very hurtful to me. So, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go on a cruise with my daughter in about 3 weeks from now, and she's living in Florida. And I will visit her. I will visit her with my daughter if she is open to that. And I like the fact that she lives there. I don't think I could talk to her on the phone. I wouldn't be able to do that. But I can see my mom with my daughter because I know that she will probably not say hurtful things if she sees my daughter with me. So as of now, I would say no, I have not resumed that relationship, and I don't think it's healthy for me. I don't think I'm capable of having her in my life without going back to a very self-destructive mode, which I don't intend to do again in my life. So another question is, can people with Asperger's syndrome get along in church? There are so many written and unwritten rules in church. Okay. That's a good question. I have a son. There's not such a thing as Asperger's anymore. That has been changed in our DSM-5. Now we say that people have autism, and they're on a different spectrums of autism. And so I have a son that is on a spectrum, and my son doesn't have any friends. It's very sad for me to see that he doesn't really socialize much with other people. It hurts me, because I wish that wasn't the case. I have recently spoken with the bishop and told the bishop about my concern, that I think that somebody should reach out to him. As of now, nobody has done that. And so I continue to try to hopefully see if it's gonna take place. But I think that they struggle. They do struggle, and sure, they struggle wherever they go, because they really struggle with social skills, and they struggle with, not knowing the rules that everybody seems to know, but they don't understand. Okay, what is the most important thing to do in regards to boundaries when healing from complex trauma? So basically, that's a good question, Nicole. I think that you need to look at first the people that, if you can't talk to the people that that are in your life, and they are willing to do better, they're willing to listen, they're willing to understand that people need a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance, I think that you should continue working with them. It's only those people that say, there's nothing wrong with me, and I don't think I should ever change, I'm just fine, and continue to be abusive to you, that you have to eliminate from your life. The people that seem to know how you're feeling, or seem to be an expert on you when they don't even know who you are, those people are the people that unfortunately you have to have them be away from you. Yeah. And you have to do that because you're a mother, because you have a profession, or whatever it is that you do. You not only you deserve to be healthy, but the people around you deserve the best version of you. And if those people are in your life, you're not going to be the best version of you. You're going to be a very destructive version, destructive to yourself and to the people that you love as well. Yeah. So anyway, I think that we kind of covered what I wanted to cover today. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, and hopefully that has helped you in any way. If you have any questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and just put in my email, type up my email. You can ask me questions. I'll be happy to answer them if you would like. So here we go. This is not letting me type. It's because I've got other languages on my phone, and it just changes. Okay, I think we've got it now. No. Okay. There we go. That's my email. Shoot me an email if you have questions, and thank you.